he got left out of the will with. Just best wishes, but what he inherited instead changed everything. And wait until you hear who came knocking. They say blood is thicker than water. But what if yours was never part of the stream to begin with? My name is Matthew. I'm 28, and until recently I believed I understood what it meant to belong, to be part of something unbreakable. Family. That word used to mean warm dinners, creaky porch swings, and holiday cards with tight-lipped smiles. But looking back now, it was always just a costume we wore well. I grew up on the edge of Havenbrook in a quiet cul-de-sac shaded by old maples and false illusions. The house was white, pristine, right down to the painted shutters and hummingbird feeder my mother refilled like a ritual. Our dog, Max, a lumbering golden retriever, would greet neighbors like royalty. To anyone passing by, we were the picture of harmony. 2 sons, 2 parents, and a life wrapped in bows. But the truth crouched behind drawn blinds and polite laughter. I was adopted at 2. My parents, Ronald and Amanda, had spent years chasing the dream of a biological child. I was their first answer. Stephen was the miracle they'd been waiting for. His arrival 3 years later didn't just change the energy in the house, it rewired it. At first, it was little things, more photos of Stephen on the fridge, his stick figures crowding the walls. Then came the bigger room. The expensive bike. Birthday parties that turned into full productions. My name was in the family but never on the marquee. They always told me I was special, that I had been chosen. But their love felt curated, performative, as if they were playing at fairness without ever delivering it. I swallowed it. I told myself stories. That it wasn't personal. That maybe this was just how parents handled things when their first child didn't come from them. So I kept my head down, studied hard, landed scholarships, and got into a top university without a single cent from them. They said they couldn't afford to help. That was the same year they renovated the kitchen and paid for Stephen's hitting coach. But I didn't hate them. Not then. I held out hope maybe the scales would balance someday. Stephen made sure they didn't. His talent for cruelty was casual, even charming. At family dinners, he'd grin and say things like, "Matthew's just the prototype, Mom and Dad got it right the second time." My parents would laugh, the way people do when they think ignoring something will make it disappear. I remember one night in particular. I was 16. Stephen stared at me across the table and in a voice laced with sugar and steel said, "You should be grateful they didn't send you back." I didn't eat that night. I climbed into bed and lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, counting cracks like they might spell out where I went wrong. Years passed. I left. Moved to Halden, rainy, gray, mercifully distant. I worked in tech, then carved out my own path in consulting. My company wasn't flashy, but it was mine, every inch of it built from the ground up. I didn't ask for help. I didn't expect it. Stephen, meanwhile, floundered through failed business ventures and beachside thirst traps, clinging to his charm like a life raft. We kept in touch when we had to. Birthdays. Mother's Day. Texts sent more out of ritual than feeling. Then, last year, the calls started. Dad had a minor stroke. Mom, early onset dementia. I flew down. I handled appointments, insurance, rearranged schedules. Stephen posted pictures at their bedside with captions like, "Cherish your loved ones." He never showed up when it mattered. But he knew where the cameras were. I told myself it wasn't about credit. It was about doing what was right. Then came the will. The sky was clear that March morning. I remember the light, how it slanted across the tiled floor of Mr. Edwards' office like it was trying to spotlight the absurdity. The lawyer was balding, tired, collar stained with coffee and weariness. I arrived early. Stephen showed up late, aviators still on indoors, reeking of some designer cologne that could knock birds from the sky. Our parents were gone. Mom first. Dad followed 3 weeks later. Their absence still sat on my shoulders like wet concrete. Talbot cleared his throat and opened the folder. The air stilled. To our son Stephen, he began, "We leave the family home, both vehicles and the remaining estate funds, totaling $740,000. I didn't flinch. I waited. He turned a page. To Matthew, he continued, "We leave our best wishes." No pause. No apology. Just those 4 words. Like a final joke I wasn't in on. I remember the silence. How it bloomed around us like a bruise. Stephen leaned back, arms crossed, that smirk rising slowly like steam off a grave. My hands didn't shake. Not visibly. But I could feel the tremor beneath my skin, the tight coil forming behind my ribs. This was the moment I stopped hoping they'd ever see me. And it was the moment something else settled in my chest. Not rage. Something colder. Something patient. That was it. No letter. No photograph. Not even a trinket. Just air. Just silence. Just best wishes. Stephen grinned like a man who'd scratched off a lottery ticket and hit the jackpot. "Well," he said, flashing that smug, venom-laced smile, "guess they finally admitted who the real son is." He leaned forward slightly, voice low and razor thin. Let's be honest, Matthew. You were never really one of us. Just the warm-up act. I didn't rise to it. Not even a blink. My jaw clenched so tightly I could hear my molars grind. But my face stayed still. I stood, turned to Mr. Edward, and offered a measured, "Thank you for your time." My voice surprised me, calm, even. Then I walked out. Outside, the spring air buzzed with the smell of cut grass and exhaust. I sat behind the wheel of my rental, hands pressed flat against the steering wheel. I didn't drive. I just stared forward. The world blurred beyond the windshield as my fingers trembled. Not from rage, but something colder, something final. A door inside me had shut, soundless and absolute. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I flew home, alone. 3 days later, my phone rang. A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "Mr. Wren? This is Rebecca with Worthington and Blay out of New York. I'm calling regarding a matter of urgent estate business." I was about to hang up, thought it was a scam, until she used my full legal name, including the middle one I hadn't spoken aloud since childhood. The one buried on my birth certificate. The one even my adoptive parents never said out loud. I said nothing for a long time, just listened as she continued. Brian and Jason, my biological parents, dead. A private jet crash off the coast of Belize 2 weeks earlier. I didn't know them. I'd never even seen a photo, but they'd known me, quietly, completely. They'd followed my life from afar, watched me grow from a distance like ghosts behind glass. They were reclusive titans in the biotech and clean energy sectors, self-made and intensely private. No other children, no surviving relatives, and they'd left everything to me. The numbers didn't register at first. A brownstone in Manhattan, a vineyard estate in Napa, a sprawling summer home tucked behind private hedges in the Hamptons, patents, stocks, royalties, a trust fund that came with its own legal team, estimated total, north of $42 million. I sat there in my apartment, staring at the darkened television, Rebecca's voice still echoing in my ear like static from another universe. I should have felt disbelief, euphoria, something cinematic, but all I felt was grief, heavy and strange. Grief for the strangers who'd once held me and somehow never stopped, for the parents I'd never met and for the boy I used to be, the one who'd stared at the ceiling, begging someone to love him just a little louder. A week later, I flew to New York. The estate manager met me at the brownstone, a quiet, ivy-wrapped building tucked away behind wrought iron and stone. They showed me everything, the property, the holdings, the locked drawers. Then they gave me the letters. Every birthday they'd written to me, every single year. Letters they never sent. Handwritten, tender, full of aching love and apologies. I read them in the study, the late afternoon sun curling across the hardwood like memory itself. And I wept, quietly, fiercely, for hours. For all the years they'd been shadows instead of hands. When it was done, I made decisions. I moved into the brownstone, established a foundation in their name, spoke to no one, not Stephen, not anyone from that past life. It was better that way, until one rainy evening, I heard the buzzer. Stephen, soaked, disheveled, stammering something about a few bad investments and needing a place to crash. I stepped outside the gate, stopped halfway down the path, just close enough for him to see me clearly. He froze. "Matthew?" he said, like he wasn't sure I was real. I didn't answer, just stood there, letting the silence stretch taut between us. He looked hollow, thinner but not in a gym rat way, gaunt, stressed, sleep-starved. His once flawless hair now fell in uneven clumps. His coat, some designer brand, was wrinkled and frayed at the cuffs, like a costume from a life he could no longer afford to play. "Man," he said with a brittle laugh, "I didn't even know you lived here. I saw the listing when I was looking for rentals and thought, no way this is Matthew's place." But then the gate opened, and he glanced around. The manicured garden, the shining brass Lenox plaque, the black stone facade that whispered wealth with every line. I let the silence do its work. Let him twist. I watched him realize what he'd walked into and what he'd walked away from. And I wasn't going to make it easy. I didn't come to fight, Stephen said, finally breaking the silence, his voice brittle like glass trying not to shatter. Things got bad. Really bad. Some investments went sideways. I took a hit, crypto mostly. Then the market crashed and I lost the house. The one Mom and Dad left me. He scratched the back of his neck. I'm buried in debt. I thought maybe we could. I don't know. Talk. I didn't move. Just watched him from behind the iron gate, arms folded across my chest like I'd been standing in judgment since the day we were boys. Talk. I asked. About what, exactly? He hesitated, fumbling for dignity in a suit 2 years past fashionable. I was angry, okay? Back then. I said things I didn't mean. About the will? About you. I let the words hang in the air. Useless words. Old tricks. You've been saying things you didn't mean since you learned to speak, I said. The only difference is this time you're on the losing end. That's not fair. No, I said quietly, it never was. His face tightened. I could see him reaching for some version of remorse, but it kept slipping through his fingers. I didn't ask to be treated differently, he muttered. But you didn't stop it either, I replied. Not when you were handed everything. Not when they looked through me like I was furniture. He looked down, shame warring with pride. So now what? He asked. You freeze me out? Let me fall. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the way you watched me struggle while you played heir to a house you didn't lift a finger to earn? He took a step closer. I made mistakes, Matthew. I admit it. But you've got money now, real money. I'm not asking for a bailout. Just a place to stay. Somewhere to breathe. That's when I realized he didn't know. Not really. He saw the facade, not the foundation. He had no idea what this house, this fortune, actually was. So I asked him, do you know who owned this place before I did? He blinked, confused. No, he said. My biological parents, I answered, watching the weight of that land. Brian and Jason. They died in a crash last year. Just weeks after Mom and Dad. He frowned. I didn't know you even. I cut in. Not really. But they knew me. Followed my life from a distance. And when they passed, they left it all to me. Every cent. Every letter. Every key. Stephen stared like I'd spoken in another language. They wrote to me every year, I continued. On my birthday. Letters they never sent. But they kept them. Dozens. Full of love. Regret. Hope. They never stopped wanting me. Even when they couldn't reach me. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. You're saying they were, what, rich? I'm saying, I said slowly, I finally know what it feels like to be wanted. Not tolerated. Not pitted. Wanted. His eyes darted to the house, to the brass nameplate, to the car in the drive. To me. Something cracked behind his gaze. Matthew. I was a jerk, okay? I get it. I was young and look, I was always scared you'd outshine me. And you did. You do. I was just trying to hold on to something that felt like mine. You had everything, I said. And it still wasn't enough. He swallowed hard, face raw and unfamiliar. I could have walked away. Shut the gate. Turned and vanished into the life that had finally begun to feel like mine. But I didn't. Not out of mercy. Not even forgiveness. Just to finish it. Wait here. I turned and walked back inside. Through the foyer lined with wildflower sketches, soft graphite drawings by a mother I'd never met but who had imagined me enough to fill the walls. I opened a drawer in the study and pulled a single envelope. A photocopy of the Lennox will. A signed letter from their estate attorney. Proof. Not of wealth but of choice. I returned and handed it through the bars. Stephen opened it with trembling hands. His eyes moved across the page like a man watching his world slip underwater. His lips parted but no sound came. This can't be real, he whispered. It's real. He stared at the paper like it was a weapon. Then his face twisted fury, shame, disbelief. So what, you're just going to stand there in your castle and watch me drown? I met his eyes. No, I said. I'm going to do what you always did, assume you'll figure it out. He stared at me, breath heavy. Silent. I closed the gate. And this time it stayed closed. His lips curled slightly, not quite a smile, more like the final twitch of a man realizing the game was never his to win. He didn't say another word. Just turned, slow and stiff, and walked away. The envelope fluttered in his hand, caught by the wind like something weightless, meaningless. I watched him go. Past the garden gate. Past the manicured hedges. Until the city swallowed him whole. Only then did I turn toward the house. I barely made it inside when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. New Mexico area code. I hesitated, then answered. The voice was calm, measured. A woman's, with the kind of composure that only comes from long familiarity with grief and secrets. Is this Matthew Lennox? Something in my chest pulled tight. Yes. Who is this? A pause. My name is Kathleen. I was your biological mother's personal attorney, Jason. I'm calling because something has come up. Something not included in the formal estate documentation. I closed the door behind me. The latch clicked shut like the snap of a verdict. The house felt different now, like it was holding its breath. I thought I had everything already. The letters. The properties. The accounts. Yes, all of that was distributed through the estate firm, Kathleen said, but Jason and Brian had additional provisions, things they kept outside the legal chain. Safeguards, you might call them. Private instructions meant only for you and only under one condition. What condition? Her voice softened. That you be contacted only if a member of your adoptive family reached out to you after the inheritance was made public. I blinked, trying to absorb that. You're saying they expected this? Not predicted exactly, but Jason had a sense about people. She told me, quote, once the well dries up, the thirsty always come knocking. A strangled laugh tried to rise in my throat but didn't quite make it. Of course she'd known. Of course she'd seen through all of it. So what is it then? Another letter. No. It's something else. Something more personal. Something she didn't want passing through the hands of bankers or estate agents. I have it in a secure box in my office in Santa Fe. But there's more. I stayed quiet. Waiting. There's someone you need to meet. Jason was very specific about that part, too. I sank down onto the edge of the leather couch, pulse slow but thudding loud in my ears. Who? Another pause. Longer this time. Kathleen? A sigh soft but heavy. Her name is Shirley. She's your sister. My breath caught. No, I said almost instinctively. That's not possible. The will, every document I've seen, says I was their only child. Legally you were, she said. But Shirley's existence wasn't part of the formal estate. Jason gave birth to her at 19, long before she met Brian. It was a closed adoption. No records. No trace. Jason spent years trying to find her and eventually did just before you turned 25. I stood, suddenly too restless to sit. My hand gripped the window frame as I stared out over the silent courtyard. And she never told anyone? She didn't want to complicate either of your lives. By the time Jason found her, Shirley had a family of her own. She didn't want to revisit the past. Until now. What changed? I asked, my voice smaller than I meant it to be. Jason's death, Kathleen replied. Shirley reached out just days later. She said she didn't want money. She just wanted a conversation. And Jason's final wish was for you two to meet. She left behind a letter sealed, handwritten, meant for your eyes only. My chest ached with a strange weight. A sister. A phantom limb I never knew was missing. For a moment I couldn't speak. You still there? Kathleen asked. I am. I can have everything ready by tomorrow. There was no hesitation in my answer. Only the quiet certainty that something had shifted beneath the surface of everything I thought I knew. Text me your address, I said. I'll be on a flight in the morning. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake, the letter already real in my mind, every word unwritten yet already humming under my skin. A sister. A second life. Another secret nestled inside the architecture of my existence, waiting to be revealed. I had always believed I was the product of one choice, given away, then chosen again. But now I was faced with something more complex. A parallel story. A mirror I'd never known existed. And suddenly I wasn't as alone as I'd always thought. The law office sat at the edge of the hills outside Santa Fe, sandstone walls glowing warm in the desert light, a quiet place that felt designed for secrets. Kathleen was already waiting in the foyer. Late 50s, poised, her expression carved from empathy and precision. She didn't ask how my flight was. She didn't offer me coffee. She's here, she said softly. But before you go in, Jason asked me to give you this. She handed me a thick envelope yellowed with time, the wax seal intact, crimson and elegant. My name written across the front in Jason's unmistakable hand. Each letter curved with care, as though she'd written it slowly, knowing it would matter. I held it like it might vanish if I breathed too hard. The seal cracked open with a soft snap. 7 handwritten pages. Each word felt like a heartbeat. Jason wrote of the girl she had been, terrified and alone at 19, with no one to guide her and no way to keep the child she brought into the world. She wrote of Shirley's birth, of the grief that hollowed her out, of the silence that followed. Then, years later, the hope that flickered when she met Brian and the guilt that never quite dimmed. Then she wrote about me. Finding you was a miracle I didn't believe I deserved. And watching you grow from afar was a strange kind of joy. A quiet joy. But not a lesser one. She explained why she'd never tried to reach out directly. She hadn't wanted to fracture the life I was building. But she had watched. Every birthday. Every graduation. Every public trace of me she could find. We were proud of you. We were there even if you never saw us. I stopped twice to breathe, each time feeling the burn behind my eyes sharpen. The letter ended with one final ask. Meet your sister. Not because I told you to. Because you both deserve to know what it feels like to belong to each other. You were never alone. Neither was she. I folded the pages carefully, then looked up at Kathleen. I'm ready. She nodded and led me down a quiet hallway. At the end, she opened a door to a private conference room and stepped aside. A woman stood inside. She looked mid-30s, maybe 6 years older than me, her hair pulled back in a simple twist, her face lined with weariness, but her posture held steady. There was something familiar in the set of her shoulders, as if we had once stood side by side in a photo neither of us remembered taking. She looked up. "So, you're Matthew?" she asked, voice cautious. I nodded. "And you're Shirley?" She gave a half-smile. Not quite sadness. Not quite peace. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, and flipped it face down on the table. "I almost didn't come," she said. "It's been a week. But I wanted to meet you. I needed to." I sat across from her. The room felt too small for the weight between us. "Did you know about me?" I asked. "Not until last year. Jason sent a letter. Said I had a brother. No pressure. No expectations. Just truth." I didn't answer. Not at first. She looked down at her hands. I wasn't ready. But after the crash, I guess I realized you can't count on time. I nodded slowly. Words felt insufficient. "So what now?" I asked. Shirley looked me in the eye. Calm. Clear. "That's what I want to figure out. But there's something else you need to see first. Before we go any further." She reached into her bag and slid out a worn photograph. A snapshot faded by time, corners curled. She placed it between us. And the moment I looked at it, my stomach flipped. There, in the background, just off-center, partially obscured, arms folded, was a face I recognized instantly. Stephen. The man who'd raised me. Taught me to ride a bike. Sat by my bed when I had the flu. Laughed at Stephen's cruel jokes. Shirley watched my face pale. "So," she said quietly. "You see it too." I stared at the photo, throat tight. "Why was he there?" I finally asked, voice hoarse. She leaned forward, fingers interlaced. "That was taken in Albuquerque. 1994, the year before you were adopted. Jason didn't even know it existed until years later. A friend had taken it at a dinner party. When she found it again, she thought she was imagining things. But it was him. I couldn't look away from the image. Couldn't stop scanning his face as if the answers might be written in the angle of his jaw or the distance in his eyes. She was sure. I asked. She was, Shirley said. It haunted her. And just like that, the foundation I'd built, truth, grief, inheritance, shifted again. Because if Stephen was there before I was adopted, then nothing I believed about my past was solid. Not my family. Not my place in it. Not even the betrayal I thought I understood. She never figured out how he ended up in that room, Shirley said quietly. Not who brought him, not why he was there, just that he was. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to smooth the static in my brain. You're telling me my adoptive father knew Jason? Not well. But yes. She found that out later after she uncovered the photo. It shook her. How? Shirley leaned forward. Stephen worked for a pharmaceutical firm in New Mexico in the early 90s. Jason did some consulting there around the same time before she built Lennox Biotech. Their circles overlapped more than once. Jason kept records, calendars, client files, corporate rosters. He wasn't just in the photo. He was in her world. I sat up straighter, the hairs on my arms rising. You think the adoption wasn't random? Shirley didn't answer right away, but her silence said more than words. She believed it wasn't. Jason thought he knew exactly who you were. Maybe not at first, but soon enough. When your file came through the agency, it wasn't just fate. It was intent. I felt something twist deep inside me. Not pain, not yet. Just a cold pressure behind my ribs like the foundation of my life was tilting. She said by the time she pieced it together, Shirley continued, you were already theirs. She tried to make contact. But Stephen and Pamela shut it down. They vanished behind legal walls. That's when Jason and Brian pulled back. Left the West Coast. Went private. She didn't want to cause you more chaos. My heart was pounding now. Too loud. Too fast. All my life, I believed I'd been placed with them by fate or chance or divine randomness. But what if I hadn't been placed at all? What if I'd been taken? Why? I asked, my voice hoarse. Why would he do that? Why bring me into their house just to make me feel like I never belonged? Shirley's expression turned sad. Jason never had an answer. But you told me he made you feel like an outsider. Like you were barely tolerated. Every day, I said. Every room in that house reminded me I was temporary. She nodded. Maybe that was the point. My breath hitched. You're saying I was leverage. A punishment. I'm saying, she replied gently, that Jason suspected he took you not to love you, but to hurt her. To leave her wondering. To keep you just out of reach. The room spun slightly. I felt like I was watching a film reel of my childhood, but every frame had shifted, same scenes, darker meaning. I looked down at my hands, barely able to keep them still. Shirley placed hers gently over mine. I know this is a lot. I wouldn't say it if I didn't think you deserved the truth. Jason wanted the secrets to end with her. She hoped that, somehow, we'd find each other and maybe start something new. I nodded slowly, voice barely audible. I needed to know, even if it wrecks everything. We talked for hours after that. About Jason. About Shirley's life. Her children. Her regrets. I told her my own holidays filled with pretend warmth, the strange ache of being invisible in a house full of people. For the first time, I didn't need to explain my pain. She understood it. She had her own version, etched differently but no less deep. Then she asked me the one question I hadn't prepared for. So, what are you going to do about Steven? I let out a long breath. I don't know. He showed up the second his world collapsed. And the way he looked at me, it wasn't regret. It was entitlement. You don't owe him anything, she said. What you owe is peace to yourself. That's the only debt that matters now. A week later, I flew back to New York. While I was gone, Steven had left 5 voicemails and one final text. Please, Matthew. I'm losing everything. When I pulled into the drive, I saw him on the brownstone steps. A duffel bag at his feet. Hoodie pulled tight. Pale. Smaller than I remembered. He stood up as I approached. Matthew, man, thank God. I didn't know if you were even coming back. I parked. Got out slowly. Met him on the sidewalk. This isn't your home, I said. I know, he said quickly. I'm not asking to stay, I swear. Look, I'm sorry. For everything. The will. The stuff I said. We were kids, man. I didn't know how much I was hurting you. I stared at him, unblinking. You were still saying it 2 years ago. His voice cracked. I was jealous. You didn't need them the way I did. You had your life together. I didn't. He looked down, voice small. I needed to be the favorite. I didn't know who I was if I wasn't. I nodded once. Slowly. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel angry. I felt done. I raised an eyebrow, letting the silence press between us. You mean you needed their money? I asked flat. Steven didn't answer. His gaze stayed on the sidewalk like the truth was scrawled in the cracks. I know about Steven, I said. His head jerked up. I know he knew Jason. I know I wasn't some orphan plucked from a folder. He took me to get back at her. He didn't love me. Not even a little. And Pamela? She just followed his shadow. Steven swallowed hard. But you, I continued, voice sharpening, you had a choice. Every single day. And you chose to remind me I didn't belong. His jaw flexed. I didn't know. No, I said. You didn't want to. You never asked why I looked over my shoulder in my own house. You just wanted to make sure I never forgot whose name came first on the family photo. He didn't speak. Just let the silence stretch between us like a scar neither of us wanted to trace. Finally, he whispered, so what now? You slammed the door? Let me hit bottom. I looked at him, the boy I grew up beside, the man I survived in spite of, and I made a choice. No, I said. I'll give you one shot. His eyes flickered. Hope, hesitation, something bruised. I've launched a foundation, I continued. In Jason and Brian's name. It'll support kids like me, like we both could have been. Displaced, overlooked, underestimated. I'm hiring people who understand what it means to fight their way forward. Steven blinked. You want me to work there? I'm offering you a job. Entry level. No favors. No corner office. You'll report to someone else. You'll earn every inch of it. Screw up and you're out. No warnings. No parachute. He stared at me like I'd just handed him a rope and dared him to climb. You're serious? Dead serious. He looked away. Shoulders slumping under the weight of choices he could no longer outrun. What if I can't do it? He asked, voice small. Then you figure it out, I said. Like I did. Or you walk. But if you take this, really take it, you don't get to quit halfway. He stood there for a long moment, something shifting in his posture. And then, slowly, he nodded. Okay. I'll do it. It's been 8 months since that day. Steven took the job. He hasn't asked for more. He hasn't complained. He shows up. He listens. He's quiet, almost too quiet, but for the first time, he's not performing. He's learning. I don't watch him like a brother. I watch him like someone who knows what it costs to crawl out of a hollowed life and start again with nothing. Shirley and I talk every week. I've flown out to see her twice. Her kids call me Uncle Matthew, and the first time I heard it, something caught in my chest, something that didn't hurt. The brownstone is still home, but it doesn't feel like a fortress anymore. It feels lived in. Grounded. Not built from grief or rage, but from memory and a kind of quiet love that doesn't ask for permission. Sometimes when the city's asleep and the world feels still, I open Jason's letters again. There's one line I always come back to. The ink has faded slightly, but the meaning hasn't dulled at all. You were never a mistake. You were our second chance. And maybe, in a way, I get to be someone else's now. Maybe this is what family really is. Not blood. Not legality. But the choice to stay. The decision to build, not burn. The courage to begin again when no one expects you to. And this time, I'm choosing peace.